It truly is the king of city builders. Despite its somewhat bare-bones approach, restrictive grid placement, and PS2-era graphics, every time I find myself playing a city builder with any kind of emphasis on survival or resource management, I always ask myself, is this worth playing over Banished? But if Banished is so great, why isn't there a Banished 2? Well, my friend, you obviously haven't checked out Earthshine's new game because, I mean, look at this shit. This basically is just Banished 2. But Banished isn't the only game that Kingdoms Reborn appears to have been inspired by. With a research tree right out of Civilization and an almost paradox grand strategy style province map, this game looks to provide more than just the challenge of your run-of-the-mill city builder. And before I get into the bulk of this review, I find it necessary to mention that the good people at Earthshine reached out to me and provided me a free key for this game, and they were obviously pretty desperate because they went as far as joining the absolute cesspit, which is my Discord server, to reach me. Link in the description if you want to be part of that shithole too. I'd like to make it clear that getting this key has had no impact on the outcome of this review in the interest of continuing my legacy of being the most unbiased game reviewer of all time who has never once been wrong, but I would like to thank them regardless for giving me this opportunity. I will admit, however, that I did already have this game on my Steam wishlist in order to keep an eye on it, as it's got some concepts that seemed pretty damn interesting to me. But still being well inside its early access period, the most important question is Kingdoms Reborn worth buying yet? Look, if you've ever played Banished, then you have a pretty good idea of what kind of a game this is right off the bat. It's a grid placement based city builder with a big emphasis on resource management, making sure you have enough food, tools, housing and whatnot to keep your settlement afloat and prevent your people from resorting to cannibalism. However, as opposed to many city builder games where the aim is simply to exist and persist, Kingdoms Reborn takes inspiration from the Civilization series in that the goal of this game is to win. You're competing with a number of other towns spread across the map, and the idea is to accumulate the most victory points, which you get through building special buildings as well as having higher populations, happiness levels and income. And much like Civilization, you will also accumulate money, science, and influence points. Money being used when buying and selling trade goods, buying new provinces, and when buying new cards. Science is used to progress through both the technology tree and upgrade trees, where influence, which draws some parallels to culture in Civilization, can be used to purchase new provinces in the place of money, as well as being used for conflict, either conquering a neighboring province or attempting to vassalize another town. I'd say the most unique mechanic in Kingdoms Reborn lies in its card system, as every in-game round, roughly equivalent to a season, you will be dealt a hand of 5 cards which you can spend money on, all based on your technology and what you've actually unlocked. The vast majority of cards are for placing a certain building, but further in the game you'll unlock cards with a special ability, such as kidnapping other people's citizens or enacting a brutal communist regime. You can't just build any building that you've unlocked. The only buildings that can be just built whenever are basic things like farm plots, houses, stockpiles, and roads. It's quite an interesting system, and I think it's a neat idea in that it throws you a bit of an extra curveball and makes you adapt to the hand that you're dealt. Pun shamelessly intended. Though relatively early on you'll unlock the ability to draw a wild card, which for a measly 15 gold will let you build any building that you've unlocked without the need for drawing that card specifically, only the price of what you'd normally pay for it. Eventually, I just found myself hoarding these wild cards and could realistically just build whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I feel like perhaps they should be a little more expensive than 15 gold to make it more of an investment to stack up rather than just being mere pocket change, because it kind of ruined that whole curveball effect that I think the card system is intended to have. As previously mentioned, science can be pooled into 2 different trees, the technology and the upgrade trees, the former being the main branch for actual progression through eras, luxury production and whatnot, and the latter being largely around unlocking new policy cards and boosts for certain resource production. I do like that it creates this sort of dichotomy of deciding what it's best to spend your science points on, but at the same time I almost feel that maybe the upgrade tree could be split further into a policy tree as well that you'll spend influence points on, as currently there's not a huge amount to do with them. Many important research goals such as era progression are also locked behind getting a certain number of houses to a certain level, which is done by supplying them with enough luxuries. Diversifying your luxury production is a huge side of the management in this game, as without doing so you'll eventually hit a brick wall in your research. Luxuries come in 3 different tiers of how effective they are, and should homes lose access to enough luxuries, they'll begin to downgrade, so you'll need to make sure that you grow massive fields of weed to keep them supplied like the drug lord that you are. The way that conflict works in this game is a little simple. I don't want to say archaic, but it's certainly not that hard to wrap your head around. You just throw influence points at either a province conquest or a vassalage attempt, and the side that throws the most points at it wins. And considering you don't use influence for much else, you usually just have shitloads lying around. Vassalage also doesn't seem to do much either. You don't appear to get any noticeable bonus from it other than an almost completely negligible amount of extra tax income, and you don't get any extra diplomatic options with the town that you vassalized. It'd be cool if you could do things like raise your vassals' taxes or take some of their population for extra workers at the risk of them growing more discontent, and it doesn't seem that there's any way that they can break free from you once vassalized, which is also pretty lame. The game also limits how many towns there can be depending on the map size, and on the smaller setting that limit is 4 towns in total, which even on a small map sets you very far apart. I think it'd be much better if you could have 8 or 12 or 16 even on a small map, to make it feel more crowded and competitive, though the conflict systems probably need some more fleshing out before it's really worth it. There's a big emphasis on zoning and smart placement of buildings in this game, which really adds to the strategy side of it. Not only is it from a logistical standpoint, but you'll want to zone libraries and schools close to homes to increase science output, keep noisy industry buildings away from homes to keep people happy, and so forth. And that's not to say that the logistical side of the game is lacking. In fact, I found it to be quite good, and where it shines the most is through one of my favourite mechanics, being able to set up new colonies alongside your original town. Once you research the new colonialism tech, you can essentially build new town centers and set up supply lines between towns to keep them going, as well as shipping back resources or population to and from your capital. It's a really neat way to not only expand your influence, but also allow you to acquire new resources that you didn't have any direct access to previously. All in all, it's the kind of game that you could honestly just about play and finish in a few sittings. Each game probably lasts about 8 to 10 hours if you're not some kind of sick bastard who doesn't just play on speed 3. I reckon it'd be an interesting idea to have longer games, and before you say just don't play on speed 3 then dumbface, I mean that it should actually take longer for research to complete, something akin to how epic and marathon games work in Civilization, to put a little more emphasis on the management and strategy at the risk of it being a little unbalanced. I think what would really hold the game back from going down this kind of route is a severe lack of competition from the AI, who, at the current moment, are completely fucking brain dead. The AI's performance is certainly one of the more disappointing aspects of the game in its current state, especially for a game that's incorporating more of those competitive RTS elements. Currently, the AI is so useless that it more or less feels like you're just playing a regular city builder without any external competition, only with less of a lifetime, as eventually you'll hit your target and have nothing much else to do. They'll typically get to a certain size and then just stagnate. You'll often find that they're in massive debt a lot of the time, and it's not that rare to see them just die off completely. There is a warning about the AI being primitive on the main menu page, but Earthshine have a long way to go to get it up to speed, because without competitive AI, what makes the game unique from a game like Banished becomes rather non-existent. It is worth mentioning that there is multiplayer, something that I have not been able to try at this stage, largely because it didn't seem that anyone was online playing it, nor did I have anyone to play with, but perhaps that could serve to counterbalance the lack of AI. Though I always feel a little ambivalent about multiplayer in games like this, especially as someone who has a tendency to always have a thumb on the spacebar to constantly pause and unpause, especially once the game gets more complex with extra colonies to manage and whatnot, so I really want to see the single player improved upon immensely in the future. The game's performance can start to chug a little in the late game. You get frequent frame drops, and it really doesn't like zooming in and out of the regional view without a bit of a pause. Might speak some volumes on how well the game is optimized, so it'd be good to see this tended to in the future. The UI is a little bare bones and seems more annoying when you first open the game up. At first there doesn't seem to be any way to check my town's statistics at all, but you do unlock it pretty quickly, though you do it through a building you place down. Granted, it's free to build, but could this not just have been a tab in the UI? A lot of the UI is locked behind buildings like this, and it seems a weird design choice. The camera is also a little janky. I found that it didn't play ball when trying to move it with WAS and D while also pivoting it with the middle click, despite working fine when using Q and D to pivot instead. Unfortunately for me, I'm more of a middle click connoisseur myself, so please fix that for me. In the end, what I can certainly appreciate about Kingdoms Reborn is that it is trying to do something different, and while I jest about it just being Banished 2, it really isn't just the same game with a fresh coat of paint. But is it worth buying in its current state? Well, to be fair, for around 30 bucks, it's still a pretty fun little city builder. There are certainly worse options on the market, and if you're interested in seeing the game develop and or want to support the devs on their journey, then by all means, I'd encourage you to look into it. I don't think I'd have any qualms about whether I got my value for money had I bought the game myself, but there's one more notable city builder that's currently the exact same price as it on Steam, and if you're a cultured gamer such as I, then you probably already own it. While I quite like the concept of what Kingdoms Reborn is trying to bring to the table, the execution of certain aspects, most notably the AI, is just not quite there yet. And if you want me to be brutally honest, what I really got from playing this game was an overwhelming feeling to just go and play some goddamn Banished.